I spoke in Vermont last Friday about my decision to vote against the president's nomination, and I wish to emphasize a few important points this morning. Nothing is more fundamental to our constitutional democracy than our basic notion that no one is above the law. This administration has undercut that precept time after time. They're now trying to do it again with an issue as fundamental as whether the United States of America will join the ranks of those governments around the world that approve of torture. This president and vice president should not be allowed to violate our obligations under the Convention Against Torture and the Geneva Conventions, or disregard U.S. statutes such as our Detainee Treatment Act and War Crimes Act. They should not be allowed to overturn more than 200 years of our nation's human rights and moral leadership around the world, starting with George Washington, re-emphasizing the waterboarding issue by President Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt. The administration has compounded its lawlessness by cloaking its policies and miscalculations under a veil of secrecy, leaving Congress, the courts, and the American people in the dark about what they're doing. The president says that we do not torture, but then he had his lawyers redefine torture, redefine it down in secret memos in fundamental conflict with American values and law. I agree with the generals and the admirals and our judge advocate general officers that waterboarding is torture and is illegal. Just think, if an American were waterboarded anywhere in the world, how would we react? We'd have 535 members of Congress would sign a petition or a resolution condemning it. Whoever was president, Democratic or Republican, would condemn it. So, and we wouldn't have to know, well, what were the circumstances or the purported justification for waterboarding this American? We would condemn it. Some have sought to find comfort in Judge Mukasey's personal assurance that he would enforce a future, a new law against waterboarding if this Congress were to pass one. Unsaid, of course, is the fact that such prohibition would have to be enacted over a veto of the president. But the real damage of this somewhat empty argument is not its futility. The real harm is that it presupposes that we do not already have laws and treaty obligations against waterboarding. In fact, we do. No senator should abet this administration's legalistic obfuscations by those such as Alberto Gonzales or John Yoo or David Addington by agreeing that the laws in the books do not already make waterboarding illegal. We've been prosecuting water torture for more than 100 years. When a top legal advisor, if I could have order, please. When a top legal advisor at our State Department cannot say that the waterboarding of an American is illegal. Just think of that. A top legal advisor at our State Department this week said they can't say that the waterboarding of an American is illegal. And our State Department cannot forcefully rule it out as a technique that might be okay for other countries' foreign intelligence services to use against United States citizens. We can see how far wrong the administration is headed. When asked at a recent public debate whether he could imagine any circumstances in which waterboarding could be justified on an American by a foreign intelligence service, in a shameful response, John Bellinger of the State Department said, one would have to apply the facts to the law. And when pressed, he said he was not willing to include it or exclude it. He did not want to get involved in abstract discussions. That is so wrong that it is chilling. The United States government is basically saying to Americans, you go abroad, you're on your own. If you're tortured in this way, we don't know whether we'll come to your aid or not. Have we stooped that low? When it comes to our core values, the things that make our country great and that define America's place in the world, it doesn't depend on the circumstances. America, the great and good nation that has been a beacon to the world on human rights, does not torture and should stand against torture. But that's not what America stands for. Indeed, the better example is set by the Army Field Manual. That instructs our forces to consider how we would react if what a soldier is about to do to someone was done to an American soldier. Senator Graham is probably as good an expert on the field manual as anyone here. In fact, in their recent letter to the nominees, Senators Warner and McCain and Graham recognize, as I do, and I hope all senators do, that waterboarding under any circumstances represents a clear violation of U.S. law. Finally, when the administration and others say that we cannot say whether America waterboards people because it would tip off our enemies, they have it precisely wrong. That is about as effective as Saddam Hussein hinting that he had weapons of mass destruction when he did not, but he made the hint in order to impress his enemies. And refusing to say that we do not waterboard prisoners, we give license to others. When the United States cannot say clearly that waterboarding is torture and illegal and will not be tolerated, what does it mean for other governments? And what comfort does that provide the world's most repressive regimes? Now, I wish I could support Judge Mukasey's nomination. I like Michael Mukasey. We have many things in common in our past careers. I certainly don't question his intellectual ability or his independence. But this is an administration that's been acting outside the law, an administration that has now created a confirmation contortion. When many of us voted to confirm General Petraeus, the administration turned around and for political advantage tried to claim that when we voted to confirm the nominee, we also voted for anything the president might do in his war policies. Just as I do not support this president's Iraq policy, I do not support his torture policy or his views of unaccountability or unlimited executive power. No one is more eager to restore strong leadership and independence to the Department of Justice than I. What we need most right now is an Attorney General who believes and understands that there have to be limitations on executive power. America needs to be certain of the bedrock principles in our laws and our values, and that no president and no American can be authorized to violate. So I will vote no on this nomination. And